Dungeons. Dungeons everywhere. Everywhere in that medieval fantasy setting, you see dungeons. Well, that's unrealistic, isn't it? Why would they be all over the place? And why would they be filled with traps and monsters and magic? Just imagine the amount of work that would have to go into creating a dungeon with all that stuff going on. Well, there's no way, right? It's just unrealistic. Well, let's look at the real world. Let's jump over to Europe. You can find all kinds of buildings with what you might call an underground dungeon underneath. Because at a certain point in history, we don't have banks protecting our goods, our money. So people, of course, would build, underground basements, areas like that you might call dungeons. And then we go to other places in the world, like, the pyramids. And there's a dungeon underneath the pyramids. So dungeons can be, spread across a medieval fantasy world. And there could be many realistic reasons why they exist. But then we get down to monsters and magic. Well, yeah, magic. You might ask yourself, if there is magic in the world, why isn't there more going on? Well, if a dungeon has magic, magic traps, well, that's a sign that more is going on, as it should be. There should be an upgrade of reality. You're a medieval fantasy, but people have the tool of magic. So there should be an expectation there that might not match the real world, but would be realistic given a fantasy world that, has magic. And then we get to monsters. Well, why wouldn't monsters take over, abandoned underground dungeons, as homes, as bases, as military bases? And why wouldn't they set up traps, right? Or why wouldn't they avoid areas where maybe, other people set up traps, right? Humans, mages, what have you. Leave certain parts of the dungeon alone. So, I can see monsters frequently taking over these places. And there's a realistic reason why you might find a lot of places that are considered underground dungeons. And then you have magic. So, that could justify a lot of what you're seeing. So then it becomes a lot less unrealistic. That is just me answering to some things I've heard out there. Critical views on dungeons in a tabletop role-playing game, and how they can be all over the place, and how that is stupid or silly. In most cases, there is not dungeons everywhere. It's just that there's a lot of dungeons being ran by DMs in a place where that's the only dungeon, and there's not 50 dungeons around. But when people think of dungeons, they just think like, oh, there must be dungeons everywhere, and all these characters are jumping into dungeons and, doing that in, say, a D&D game. But that's usually not the case. But even if it were the case, it's not unrealistic. Now we get to how I make a dungeon. So I'm going to tell you how I make a dungeon, and you can take from that what you will. I go straight to the imagination, and I write my dungeon out. At the top of some brainstorming notepad, it's dungeon, floor 1. I might put like a entrance, and then write what I want down for the entrance. I try to imagine it in my mind. And then there's that, the first hallway or what have you. What items would I like to put in there? Would I like to have a trap, somewhere in there? Some type of maybe underground well, stuff like this. So I'll write it all down. Remember, I'm not drawing anything at all. I'm just imagining it, and then I'm making notes. I'm making notes about what I want to have in that hallway. And then how many rooms, what are in the rooms. Maybe some have monsters, maybe some have nothing and they're empty. There's traps. I write all that out for each room. I want a trap here. I want this going down. And the whole time that I'm writing all this down, I'm imagining the dungeon. I'm just making the notes that I need to. I'm not worried about my imagination being exactly drawn out on paper. I'm just going to use it to come up with these ideas, right? For the hallway, for the rooms. And then, if there's a staircase, the details around the staircase that might lead down to another floor. And then all that stuff. And there's a reason I want to do all this. Because when I go to draw out the dungeon, I want to know exactly what I'm doing. where it's not me needing to figure things out as I draw the dungeon. Oh, I'll put a room over here. Who knows what I'll put in that room? Maybe this type of monster, maybe a trap, maybe whatever. No, I don't like to do that. I like to have a guiding set of notes that's going to help me just design, draw out the dungeon to match the notes. It doesn't mean I won't make changes along the way. It doesn't mean that I won't come up with a different idea. But that is the process I do. Imagination, write the entire dungeon out, and then I start to draw the dungeon to match the notes as best I can. And through the entire process, I'm open to changing my mind. Nothing is set in stone until I run that dungeon for players in a gaming session. And that's how I look at most everything. Nothing is set in stone until it's actively applied in the game. So, when it comes to a dungeon, when it comes to anything, when I'm making something, I'm never going, I have to keep it this way. So even if you make a note on something and you're doing the dungeon in the way that I'm suggesting here, don't hold yourself to those notes. If you come up with different ideas in the process, make changes. Anyway, for now, take care. You know what you can do? You can hit the like button. You can share the video. Oh, and there's another button you can press. That one that lets you subscribe to my channel for more content. Oh yeah, there's that bell thing. You can press that so you know when I've uploaded a new video right away.